Hello, welcome back to the channel. So it would seem Napoleonics is the new hotness. I mean, it's always been popular, but with epic battles getting released at the moment, there's tons of it all over the internet. And as you know, Napoleonic wargaming is something that I've been involved with for many years now and in many different scales. 6mm, epic battles, I've got 28mm. So I thought, thinking about Napoleonics, I would look at a game system which I've had floating around for a while but never really got around to doing much with. That's Blucher by Sam Mustafa. What I plan is 3 videos. This one where I look at the rules and talk a bit about them. A second where I do a bit more of an in-depth playthrough. I'm going to have a couple of games. Probably during the second game I'll get the camera out mid-game and talk about a few things. And finally one where I look at my initial thoughts and see how they came together in the games I played and my overall views of the Blucher Wargames rules. So I've actually had Blucher for some time now and never really got around to it. Now, I'm going to talk a bit about the style of the rules. When I talked about Black Powder, I said they were a simple set of rules but made more complex by the excessive prose. However, that prose added to the feel of the book and made it an interesting book to look through, and the Black Powder book, something I've gone back to many a time to look at, and I enjoy the wee sidebars and stuff in it. However, Blucher is the opposite, and what it looks like is a simple set of rules, tightly written, with less hooks for casual reading. This hits the need for a clear set of rules, and it's well written, but it's never hooked me over the years. It's been on my shelf to go back and have a look and jump around with. So a quick flick in it. As you see, it's very clear, concise. The pages and the text isn't cluttered. Lots of nice simple diagrams and wee bars explaining the rules. So what tends to happen is there'll be the rule explanation, and then if there is any, the rules written, then if there is any extra explanation or examples made, they'll be off to one side. So, as I say, it's clear, well laid out, self-reference, and makes callbacks and reminders as you go through. So, for example, if I can find it, in the shooting section, the firepower section, you've got these things on the side, the symbols which help you remember what the special rules are and what they look like. And it's really useful because these corresponds to the symbol on the card. It's the symbol on the cards. On the cards, do you mean the cards that tell you the stats? Well, no, I mean the cards you can play the games with. Yes, you heard me right. The game can be played in a traditional style with miniatures, and there's a section in the rules enabling you to do that. But also, they're produced and is fully supported with cards. So, cards look like this. Start off hidden, and during the game, you flip over. So, for example, infantry, artillery, must be cavalry somewhere. There you go. And actually, you see on the cards there that you're looking at kind of formed up units. The scale of Blucher is of high level organization. It's armies and corps being engaged. Now, before I play it, and I've not really played a game with cards before, I've often thought the current interest in 2mm wargaming that perhaps it would be better used, instead of creating 2mm armies, of a nice set of cards. So before you get to the table, actually I think the cards and being able to represent you is a really interesting idea. Certainly I think there's something around in the 80s, Tabletop Games might have published them, a Micro Warfare series, a series of rules where you could buy sort of like counters to represent the armies that go on the battlefield, which, to catch strapped young and like I was back then, getting into war games, looks pretty appealing. I think I picked up the Napoleonic one, and yeah, it was interesting. I think I still like my miniatures. However, I'll come back to the cards. How do the rules play? So like I said at the start, and you get a good idea when we flick to the army lists, the rules are set at an operational level, with each unit representing a brigade. Level of command being corps and army. It's designed to have large army-style engagements played out in an evening. Units have two states, as it says before, revealed or hidden. For the cards, this is really simple, and you just flip them over. For miniatures, you start off with your cards like that, and then when your unit is formed, pop them down, and as long as you fill in the space required, not an issue. And actually, just as a wee aside, you could quite easily, these are epic battle stands, you could easily have, when the card is revealed, you could easily have a couple of stands on the unit if you wanted a more 3D look to your army. When a unit does something, it's revealed, and an enemy has an opportunity to spot your units as well. Now, how the game flows is you get a series of momentum points, and it costs momentum points to activate units. And activation works on a core level, and once you finish your core level activations, you would activate individual units, and then once you finish your individual units, you would activate your army commander. Now there is a twist. You don't get to see the number of momentum points you get. Now, so you 3d6, so let's have a quick look at what that would look like. Oh, there you go, mega dice roll. So I get 16 points there. Now first up come my core activation. Supposing I activate a core and activate 5 units in that core, that would cost me 5 activation points. Now I don't get to see this, but my opponent would tally it up, so I'd take 5 off the total. Then my second core I activate. There's 4 units activating there, they cost 1 for 1. So my opponent would keep reducing that number. Then finally come in the middle come individual units. Now these cost 2 points per activation, so it's a lot more expensive in terms of momentum points to operate units that aren't part of a core structure. So say I operate 3 of those units, which would leave me 1 left. Now it doesn't cost me anything for my army commander to activate some units, but it's the last thing I ever do. So I'd put my army commander down, everybody within a certain radius would get to operate. But there you go. So as another example, not quite as good a dice roll. So in that example before, so activate my first core, so 5 gets used. Activate my second core, 4 gets used, so I'm down to 2. Activate my first unit, and my opponent says, boom, there you go, that's you done. That's all your momentum done. So I wouldn't be able to activate my full battle plan. The distances on the battlefield is used with base widths, and these are 3 inches. But the rules are agnostic enough that you can set the BW base width at whatever size you want it. So if you're playing with the bigger miniatures, you want the bigger sizes on the tabletop, that's totally doable as well. Now, when you are moving, movement has 2 types, a simple and complex. So simple movements, basically wheel backwards and forwards, and complex is if you've got to go through terrain, or you're moving backwards, or you're turning, for example. So when you're looking at the cards, infantry have a 2-1, cavalry have a 4-2, and most artillery have a 2-1, with horse artillery having a 3-1. Dead simple. So what are my initial thoughts about the momentum system? It's a simple method of making the player feel really focused on what part of the battlefield matters and how best they're going to order and maneuver their forces to their critical points, and then balance out the needs to use momentum points at that critical point whilst maneuvering the rest of the army around in reserves. Now, some people won't like the randomness of those dice rolls. So theoretically, I could roll 3 6s and have 18 pips, or I could roll 3 1s and have 3, or somewhere in between. May I suggest that if you didn't like so much randomness, you could use 3 average dice. And average dice, in case you don't know, they were used a lot back in the day. I don't see them much in rules these days. So an average dice would have a 2, a 5, 2 3s and 2 4s. So you're cutting out the outliers of a 1 and a 6. Now, I like the idea system since war, the idea of the system and momentum, since war is always subject to friction. And I want my games to have an element of friction in them. How many times has aide-de-camps been lost or killed on the battlefield, orders poorly written? And I think these should always be part of a war game. I don't tend to like games where you get to move everything without friction and then your opponent does. Now, since I play solo lots as well, this system does not suit me. Because, you know, if it was a British turn, for example, I know precisely how many orders I've got and I can plan around that. So I'll play through where I can see the order system, how many pips I've got, and play around that, see how that feels. But actually already I'm thinking about a few ways where I might have a d20 and roll a dice and count down from the d20. Do I take pips off? So if I roll a d20, say I roll a 14, every time I would lose a point off that momentum, might roll a dice, and a 4, 5, or 6, I do, 1 to 3, I don't. So it makes me have that random element as a commander and getting back to the feel of those rules of not quite knowing how far you can push your commands that turn. But I'll let you know how that gets on. So combat and damage, right. Let's start looking at the meat of the rules. So I'm going to set up a British unit and a French unit. So combat and damage are based on a stat called a LAN. So that's what these boxes are here. When you fire or attack, you're rolling a number of dice equal to your LAN. Damage caused removes a LAN. Now, I said before, there's special rules, and these are noted up the side. I'm just going to show you basically taking into account this symbol here, which is a firepower special, that's a skirmisher. This symbol here, which is a firepower special rule. Firepower happens if you're firing at close range. So these two units are facing off against each other. Let's say the British are going first. So you say 1 base width, 3 inches is volley range, 2 base widths is skirmish range. This matters with how the special rules intersect. So the British are firing, they've got an elan of 6, so I'm going to roll 6 dice. It's 6s to hit. So I've rolled those, and as you can see there, I've got 2 6s, so that's 2 hits on the French, and I've got a 5, and the firepower means that at close range, one of those 5s can count as a hit as well. So of course 3 hits to the French, it's actually quite catastrophic to the French. So at 6, 5, 4, their elan is now 3. So if the French were returning fire, they're only getting 3 dice. Now they don't have the firepower special rule, they have the skirmisher special rule. So if I roll these dice, the French have got 1 6, so we would knock the British down to 5. One of the things they talk about with the cards is using clear plastic sleeves, and then you can just mark off and clean them as needed. Artillery have a longer range, as you'd expect. But every time they fire, this is called an ammo tracker. So every time they fire, you mark off an ammo tracker. Now with 6s firing with shooting, in hand-to-hand combat, it becomes 4s. And that's basically it. That's the rules at a pinch. So you got your momentum orders to determine how many units you can move. You've got the simple or complex maneuvers to determine how far you can move. And you've seen there how the elan works with firepower and taking damage. And that's the basic rules. In the advanced rules, you get rules for weather and seasons, scale variations of whether you want to play lower down the order command, reinforcements coming onto the battlefield, entrenchments, multiplayer games, mixed brigades, rally, So regaining elan, artillery attached to units, overstrength and understrength units, army exhaustion, and commanders and sub-commanders. There's also a section about playing with miniatures without the cards, and I fully believe that this book is a complete package for the size and scale of battle that you want to have in the Napoleonic era. So let's have a look at army lists. So as it says before, so it's got the rules, all very clearly laid out. The advanced game. And army building. In fact, there you go. So I was saying it was get 3. Depending on the size of the game, depends how many momentum dice you get. So it says a small game would last 2 to 3 hours with 12 to 16 units on each side, and a large game with 3 to 4 hours with 20 to 24 units on each side. So the army lists. So when you're constructing your force, this is the Austrian army list. So it tells you your minimum number of corps for your game, minimum number of units in those corps, some commanders if you unit, the artillery you could buy them, heavy, horse and foot artillery, and what ammo they would get. Commanders you could buy with their special rules attached to them. And this here shows you the black number is minimum units you need to buy, and the white numbers are maximum units you can buy, how many points they are, their starting elan, and any special rules attached to them, and finally any special rules for the army. So there you get a look at what it means for the looks like for a game. Now there's no real history in this section, there's no real history in the book, and that's one of the things I was talking about at the start about grabbing you to keep you coming back and looking at it. So for example, like the Waterloo book by Warhammer Historical, Black Powder, I continually go back and read those. This isn't a book I'd really want to look at unless I was playing a game. You know what? Ultimately it's a rule book, so it does what it says on the tin. What army lists do you get? There's armies for Austria, Britain, and variation for the Peninsular and 100-day variants. French 1805 to 12 and 1813 to 14. The 1805 to 12 list has a variant for the 100 days. Ottoman, don't often see in Napoleonic Wargame. Prussian 06 to 07 and Prussian 13 to 15. Russian and Spanish. And the armies have allies where appropriate. So there you go. There's a British list. And you can see where they've got Peninsular 100-day options and your allied sections. So plenty of army lists there. And now let's jump on to, you've got a whole campaign system as well. And it's quite a detailed set of campaign, fairly simple and easy to play. And after all of that, you have one scenario. So there you go, I've flicked through quite a few pages there for the campaign. That sometimes you get a campaign which hasn't got enough bite to grab me as a campaign. Sometimes you get campaigns with too much bite, which become complex. This looks a simple enough campaign system. And finally, you've got a historical scenario. Now, if you forgive my pronunciation, Fuentes de Ono, which is a Peninsular War battle. So it talks about what it meant, how you went about, selected your forces, decisions you made. Anytime you look at a historical battle, you've sometimes got to make some decisions about how you are going to organise that force for the tabletop. And it's always interesting to see designers' notes about how they went about that, because you will have to make a decision. Is that a large unit? Is that a small unit? Should those two units be pushed together for a brigade, etc.? Should those... And it gives you an order of battle. And finally, what I quite like is appendices, which frequently ask questions, which also cover the designer's notes and giving you thoughts about that. I think a lot of Wargames rules, a key to understanding the rules is understanding the designer's thoughts on things. And that means if something oddball comes up, you can apply those to help you fix your decision matrix as well. Now, what I'm going to do right now is talk a bit about the cards and support. So there's a couple of card packs available at the moment. So I've got this one, which is the Armies of the 100 Days. So this is the French, British and Prussian armies for Waterloo, for the game. It's as simple as that with the relevant commanders. It's also got cards you could use for the campaign counters as well. Good reset. So with a mat, and I've got a Waterloo battle mat from Cigar Box Games, the book, this, and a handful of dice. I can easily take Waterloo anywhere to pitch up and play. There's also at the moment a set of cards, War to the Death, which is the Peninsula, Spain, France, Britain, forces for the Peninsula. Now other cards are cards for the armies, and for all the army lists that's in the book are available from drive-through cards, which is a really elegant solution for getting cards produced and out to people. And there's links to the Honours website to be able to find those easily on drive-through cards. Certainly, obviously it's available in America, and the cards are available in Britain. I've used drive-through RPG for role-playing game supplements before. Dead easy to use. Now the cards, when you get them, doesn't have names or cores on them because they're just generic cards. These are set for 100 days. But if you're using those plastic sleeves I was talking about, you'd be able to write the names and the formations on them as well. So there you go. And with that as well, you can mark off those as required. And if you did have any catastrophic game and table issues with drinks getting knocked over, etc., you're not going to ruin your cards. Final thoughts on Blucher. This looks to be an elegant way to get some big feeling Napoleonic games on the table. I like the look of the momentum system as a way to encourage cores acting together and keep simple friction in the game. The cards make things easy and accessible for players. Like I said before, with the trend for 2mm battles, I've often thought if you're going that small, why not use nice counters or cards, for example, and these would be the things I'd be looking for that. I'm not adverse to brigade-sized units or the scale of the game. However, this set of rules deals with the operational size of battles. And just looking at the rules before I play, to me, it means a lot of what makes Napoleonics feel like Napoleonics, squares, line, columns, seem to be missing. Now, there is a set of rules called prepared. So, for example, your infantry unit can prepare itself. That means that it might represent units forming up for close combat, or it could also mean that units are forming squares to repel cavalry. So I don't know how I'm going to feel about that yet. At the moment, what I'm thinking is, does it feel like Napoleonics? So as I go on to having some games of Blucher, I'll be looking for things that make it feel like Napoleonics as opposed to just a regular war game. Could those cards represent legions of Republican Rome, for example? This matters, as I have no doubt it's a decent set of rules, well written, able to jump in, quite fun to play. And the question I'm going to be answering for, does it capture the feel of the period? Now, if you've got any thoughts or questions about Blucher, fire them away. If you're using Blucher and want to throw me some top tips, put them in the comments section. As you know, I love talking about gaming. But anyway, I hope you're having a great time gaming at the moment. I know I am, and I look forward to seeing you again. And that's goodbye for now. Goodbye.